Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach. With encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice, Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
I'm Dr. Zoe, and if you're listening for the first time, I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a life and relationship coach, and a motivational speaker. Welcome. And I can work with you virtually to help you get unstuck. I believe that every woman has a superpower, and my passion is to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. Connect with me by texting the word JOIN to 38470, or you can go to my website at drzoeshaw.com. So today's topic is getting through those hard times in a marriage. When the going gets tough, sex. Yes, I said it, sex. That's not the only thing that we're going to talk about today, but it is a big part of it. And I've been married for 25 years. Yes, I was a teenager when I got married. Seriously, I was. And I'm going to be sharing my story and this book that I've been writing forever. But one day you guys will all hear about it. But after 25 years of marriage, I have a wealth of knowledge about getting through hard times. Whether you've been in a marriage for a year or 20 years, those hard times do come, and we're going to talk about that today. My guest is Dr. Sarah Schewitz of coupleslearn.com. She's a licensed psychologist and a couples specialist, and we're actually welcoming her back. She and I had a really great conversation in episode 18 about how your childhood affects your relationship. So before we get started, Superwoman Win and Superwoman Fail time. Every week, I share my Superwoman win and my Superwoman fail from the week because every woman has those good times and those bad times, and we need to be able to roll with those punches. I'm offering you some camaraderie. I have them. You have them. We need to embrace that beautiful chaos that is our life. So my Superwoman win is that my kids had two different events on the exact same day, and they were major events. So sometimes I can't always make everything, but my son was in a mock trial that he'd been preparing for months, and we'd been looking forward for even longer for him to do this mock trial. And my other son, it was league championship day for track. He's on a high school track team, and it was his league championship. And so, of course, I need to make both of them. And each of the events were a couple hours away from each other. And my win is that I made it to both. It was a winning day in the Shaw household because I was able to get to my son's mock trial and get to my son's track meet, and I only had to drive a total of 6 hours to make it happen. But I got to my son's mock trial. I stayed long enough to hear the judge make the verdict. They won. Yay! I kissed and I congratulated him, and I jetted out couple of hours in the opposite direction to make it to my son's meet, and I got there in time to see him run his hurdle race and win league championship for the year. So that definitely felt like a Superwoman day for me and for my kiddos too. So there's my win. So my fail. After all that great stuff, I totally forgot that my son had SATs. Yes, I actually forgot he had SATs. And so the night before, and we'd been talking about it for weeks, studying all that stuff. And the night before, he asked me if he could spend the night at a friend's house. He had just had a play, and I let him spend the night, which I wouldn't have done if I had remembered that he had his SATs the next day. And he woke me up at like 7, and he called me. He's like, "Mom, I need my ticket." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? You need your ticket." And he said, "I'm at the SATs, and they said I needed a ticket to get in." And I was like, "Oh no, I totally forgot about the SAT." So of course, I'm rushing down to get him his ticket. But the beautiful thing is that he remembered and he took the responsibility, as he should have, to get himself there. So I'm not so happy that, he didn't remind me. And I later found out that was purposeful because he knew if he had reminded me he had his SATs, I wouldn't have let him go to spend the night at his friends, which is true. So I wasn't happy about that. But overall, it is a Superwoman fail because I forgot, but it's also a win because I'm raising a son who took care of his own business. Of course, he didn't forget the ticket because he didn't know about the ticket. So there's my win fail for the day. So let's get on to today's topic. Getting through hard times in a relationship. When the going gets tough, sex. So thank you so much, Dr. Schewitz, for coming on the show. I'm so excited to have you back.
I'm so excited to be back. I had so much fun last time, so this will be great as well.
Absolutely. We had a great time. And Dr. Schewitz was on episode 18 talking about how your childhood affects your relationship. So you guys can check that out, episode 18. But today we are talking about getting through the hard times in your relationship when the going gets tough, sex. So we all have hard times in relationships, and you're a relationship therapist. So that's what you deal with, right?
Yep, sure is.
Yep, all those hard times. And as I talked about in the intro, I've been married for 25 years. So I'm kind of a veteran of getting through hard times in a relationship. You can't be married that long without having a few of those.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, we all have them. And so today's show is really just talking to you women about getting through those hard times and actually why sex is important when you're getting through the hard times. So, Dr. Schewitz, why is sex one of those first things to go, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but sex is so deeply tied to happiness in a relationship that when things start to get tough, oftentimes you don't feel like having sex with your partner because maybe you're angry with them or you're annoyed or you're just not feeling that attracted to them in the moment because, you're fighting or things aren't as great as they used to be. So sex is definitely linked with desire, and it's not one of those things that you sometimes just can do anyway. Some people can, some people can't. So
Right. Well, you don't generally desire somebody that you're really mad at, someone who's hurt you emotionally, and
right.
someone you feel distant from. So that definitely makes sense. And so it is really one of those first things to go when we start to notice that there's distance in a relationship, or there's anger, or there's hurts. The problem is that sex is actually really important, even in those bad times. So can you talk a little bit about, I like to call it, and a lot of people have called it glue, that sex really is the glue that holds our relationships together. Why is it that even when things are going bad and you're feeling really distant and angry, that you should still try? And I say try because it's hard. Why should you still try to have sex with your partner?
So sex is a bonding experience for many. We actually, when we orgasm, we release endorphins into our system, which is a natural form of morphine. That's a drug that makes you feel good. So if you're feeling really bad about your partner and you have sex and you do reach orgasm, or even just cuddling, being intimate in any way, releases oxytocin as well, which is the love hormone, and it can really help bond you together again.
Yes, that's so true. I was hoping you would go chemical because that's exactly what happens. And it's hard to do that. And I think sometimes to even acknowledge, you know what, we're not feeling so great about each other. I'm still a little mad at you. We're going to have to figure out how to get through this, whatever it is we're going through. But let's push through and still try to have sex and still hug each other and still say those words because we value this marriage. We value our relationship. And we understand that it sucks. And sometimes just both of you being able to acknowledge where you are can help so much. And it can help you separate the issue from the person.
I love that. It's so true. It's like saying, I'm mad at you and I'm mad at the situation, but I still love you unconditionally. I'm still here.
Exactly. And so many times in relationships, when we get to that point where we're mad and we're upset, it's like we throw the baby out with the bathwater. The whole thing sucks. The whole thing is horrible. And we're not willing to look at any of the positive aspects. And sometimes we feel like there's no hope, even in that moment. And we distance ourselves from each other when we don't have to do that. If you've committed to being in this relationship, then you got to kind of be in it even when the going gets tough. So, okay, sex is glue. It's the bonding experience. We know that after sex, we often feel much more positively toward our spouse than we do before sex. But there are differences. And one of the differences is that some people, often the women, need that intimacy to even have that desire to have sex. Whereas sometimes, often the men, we need sex to feel that intimacy.
Yeah, it's so true. Often a difference in the way that we view sex. And if you're the partner that needs to have sex to feel closer, then you're not going to feel close if you're not having sex. And if you're the partner that needs to feel close to have sex, then you're not going to want to have sex. So it's really a catch-22. And I guess it begs the question, who gives and what's the quote unquote right answer? I would go back to the chemicals again, that if you do have sex, you're likely going to feel closer, assuming it's a positive sexual experience as well. If it ever feels coercive or if it triggers past trauma to have sex when you don't want to, then I absolutely don't recommend it. But if it's like a positive sexual experience, you're both feeling good, you're both maybe orgasming or at least feeling connected in the moment, then it kind of gives you a place to go from. So I would say the one to maybe give in could be the partner who's just not feeling it. And the way you can kind of talk to yourself is, I will feel more connected after this chemical change. And this is going to help me get through this rough patch with my partner.
Yes, I love that you said that. Who gives? And, I don't know about you, Dr. Sarah, but I have never seen a couple where both of them are on the same page with the whole sex bonding thing. It's just, we generally marry our opposites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you said kind of the gender thing, and I'm seeing that, more and more couples that I see, that's shifting. And it's not just, and I know you gave that caveat, but it's really not the women necessarily with low desire anymore. I would say even more probably men at this point who have lost interest in sex or just aren't feeling the desire. And the women are kind of like, hey, come on, we need to be doing this.
Yes. And I think we talked about that privately when we talked about how we were seeing that trend in our therapy sessions with couples. And, I have to say that I have noticed that a lot of that is tied to men participating and looking at a lot more porn. I did an episode, I don't know which one it is right now, but about dealing with porn in your relationship. So you might want to go check that out if that's an issue that you have. But I love what you said when you said, if it's a positive sexual experience, because certainly you don't want to feel coerced. And I did a podcast with Dr. Lori Bisbee, and I thought it was so good because we talked about sex and we talked about that concept of, well, if I don't feel like having sex, I shouldn't have sex and I shouldn't do something I don't feel like in a relationship. But then we also kind of tied it to other things we do in relationships. So, maybe we don't feel like being sacrificial and, making something to eat for our husband, or maybe we don't feel like giving him a back rub, or maybe we don't feel like, driving and picking up his mother from the airport. But because we love our spouse, we do things that we know make them feel cared for and loved. And I don't know why sex should be any different. Now, of course, we also expect that our spouses are reciprocating and doing things for us that they know make us feel cared for and loved.
Yep, I agree fully.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some solutions. You need to incorporate sex in your relationship, even when you're going through a really tough time. So let's talk about ways we can do that. How can you do that when you are in whether it's a rut or just not really feeling each other?
It really depends on why you're not having sex. I think that can also shift the answer a little bit. If there's any type of sexual dysfunction where maybe there's some shame or embarrassment from, it could be not being able to orgasm or orgasming too soon, or males not being able to keep an erection, then there's a really specific kind of treatment plan for that. That involves just working your way back into sex while taking the pressure off. And any sex therapist can walk you through that. So if that's the case, I would say get help, because it seems like such an overwhelming problem and maybe an insolvable problem. And it's really not. It's really not. So I would say for that, go through a systematic process where you're getting comfortable, just kind of cuddling and caressing and touching each other without the pressure of sex. And then you kind of build up to different levels of intimacy until you're ready to actually have sex again. And that's called systematic desensitization. That's like a very short explanation of it. But if you're, maybe just in a rut emotionally, and that's why you're not connecting sexually, then I think one really good way to kind of jumpstart yourselves out of that is a 7 days of sex challenge. That's a really It can be a really fun and challenging experience for couples who haven't been having sex, but it's kind of like you draw the line in the sand and you say, you know what? Enough is enough. We're going to change this and we're going to make it happen. So for 7 days in a row, we're going to find time to have sex because I know, with kids and busy lives and running a business or working, whatever, is going on in all of these super moms' lives, it's super hard to find time for sex sometimes. And sometimes that's just the problem.
That's true.
But in reality, we can always find time for something that we prioritize. And I think that's what the 7 days of sex challenge really helps you figure out is that you can make it work if you've committed to it.
I love that. And that's so true. We can find time to do the things that are really important to us. And I love the 7 days of sex because that seems doable. You can take a week and go, okay, we are going to really focus on this. We're going to do it every single day. I've heard the 30-day challenges and I've read some blogs about the 30 days of sex, and they're super good, but super hard and in some ways kind of funny. But
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody come off of any of those challenges without really having a powerful experience in their marriage or in their relationship.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
And I think there's a few reasons why. Number one, when you're doing 7 days of sex, you get creative. You're not just going to do the same thing every day in a row. And number two, it really tunes you back into your partner. It gives you plenty of time to kind of understand your likes and dislikes and express those. Another key part of it is really understanding what initiation looks like. How can you kind of pick up on the subtle cues that your partner's trying to initiate sex? Because sometimes that's the problem. A partner thinks they're initiating and the other partner has no clue.
Yes. And I've seen this so much where I'll talk about, okay, when we decide, okay, this person's going to be initiating for, this amount of time, and couples come back into the session and I'm like, okay, did you initiate? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, no, you didn't. Like, you guys were both there, but he didn't see the signs. Hers were super subtle. So yes, I love that.
So that's kind of the build up to the 7 days of sex is you talk about what are some of the signs that I'm initiating. And then I would just recommend each person is responsible for initiating every other day. So basically you just switch off.
Perfect. And so when we talk about initiating, I don't think I can talk about initiating without talking about that fear of vulnerability.
Yeah. Especially if you haven't had sex in months or years, the thought of initiating for the first time is terrifying.
It is.
I mean, this is a person you live with, so well, but it can feel awkward. It can feel embarrassing. And if you get rejected in that moment, when you've gone out on a limb so far, it can really be heartbreaking and just make you never want to try again. So part of the challenge is you're not allowed to say no to your partner for those 7 days. If you're not in the mood, you figure out how to get in the mood because you've really got to build that confidence again that when I initiate, my partner's either going to be ready or figure out how to get ready.
I love that.
If you're not in the mood, you got to tell your partner, okay, I'm not really there yet. Here's what I need to get there. Can we light some candles? Can we take a bath together? Can you give me a massage? Like, be very vocal about what will get you there. And if you don't know, just say you don't know, but can we try a few things?
Yeah. And I think also understanding that vulnerability in a relationship is actually really good. It's terrifying. But when you're able to do those things and express yourself in a way that is terrifying in a relationship, and when the other is there and reciprocates and hears you, the experience of intimacy is heightened. But you have to get over that fear to do it in the first place.
Yeah. And those little moments build trust.
They do.
They build trust, and that builds intimacy.
They do. And the beauty of this is that, like you said, you can't be rejected. So although there's still that fear, you're setting up a system where you can win because you've already decided you're going to do these 7 days of sex. And so for people who aren't used to at all initiating, this is the perfect time to be able to practice initiating when you've already decided that you're going to be having sex for 7 days.
Exactly. And then there's kind of a nice follow-up to that. So that's kind of like the tear off the Band-Aid approach, right? Like you haven't had sex in a year or something, and then you're just going to rip off the Band-Aid and do it 7 days in a row. Like it's a little extreme, but sometimes we need to be shaken up a little bit to get out of a rut.
Yes.
And then you might wonder, like, okay, what do we do after that to keep the intimacy going when we're not in this challenge? And so what I love recommending for couples is decide what your ideal number of times that you want to have sex per week or per month is. And the follow-up is that, let's say you decide we want to have sex once per week. That means there's 4 times a month that you're supposed to be, having sex, potentially 5, depending on the month. So you kind of split up the month and say, all right, the first 2 weeks are your 2 weeks. So you're responsible for initiating twice during those 2 weeks. The second 2 weeks are my 2 weeks. So I'm responsible for initiating those 2 weeks. Or you can switch off, every other week, however you want to do it. But it takes the pressure off one partner, because typically the one who wants to have sex more is also the one who's initiating more and getting shot down more. And that, quite frankly, that just sucks. It sucks to be that person.
Right.
So that kind of evens it out for people.
I love that. That's a great idea. And the scheduling is so important. So if you guys are going to participate after those 7 days of sex, then you need to get into a scheduling routine. And so many people say to me, oh, I don't like the idea of scheduling sex. It just feels too rote and it takes all the romance out. But then I always remind them, you used to schedule dates. You used to schedule time to be with your husband before you got married, and you never felt that wasn't romantic. And so why would you not schedule that now in your marriage when you're trying to maintain that romance?
That's a great point. I actually have never thought of it that way. And it's so true. Of course we schedule dates. You have to.
You have to.
So why
exactly.
not? Yeah.
You have
to. Great point.
And you plan for it and you look forward to it and it feels good and it's exciting. And then after you get married, you feel like you shouldn't have to do that. But why not? Of course you do. Guys have busy lives.
And that's why with the, kind of rotating weeks, at some point during that week, you're going to have sex if that's what you've agreed upon, that it's once a week or whatever. But it does leave a little mystery for those of you who are saying, I really, really don't want to schedule it down to the moment. Fine. Then you just know that sometime in that week, your partner is going to initiate. And you hopefully after the 7 days of sex have learned some of their cues or learned how to communicate like, hey, this might be happening tonight. Like maybe your partner goes in the bedroom and lights candles and that's your cue. Okay. When I go to bed, he's definitely going to initiate. So let me get my mindset right. Even if I'm totally distracted and not feeling it tonight, it gives you, a little advance notice.
Yes, absolutely. And so you mentioned earlier picking a time. So my thought quickly went to how do you pick a time? Or not a time, but how many times per week? Because often, like I said before, we marry our opposites. We don't have the same sex drives. And so one partner might want to have sex 3 times a week. Another partner might want to have sex once a week. And so my suggestion is you each write down, this is my number, or tell each other, this is my number. And then you find something in between that both of you guys feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's for sex. And those are a couple solutions when you're in a marriage rut and you kind of don't know what to do and you recognize that you're not having enough sex. These are a couple of things that you can implement. Now, what about for a woman who just doesn't feel that intimacy and is really, really, really struggling? I want to talk a little bit about some ways that a woman can help rekindle that feeling of intimacy in her marriage.
Yeah. So I don't think it's just the woman to rekindle that. I think it's a joint effort. And it starts with really sharing with your partner what you need to feel that intimacy. The hope is that if your partner's motivated to make you happy and also to have sex, then they can start doing some of those things. I love having my couples write down a list of things that make them feel loved and cared about. And then I ask them to do one thing per day off their partner's list. And that little gift, it's kind of a gift to give your partner that thing each day, builds so much goodwill over time. that really can help up the intimacy in the relationship.
I love that. So having your partner, each person write a list of things that make them feel loved or things that they would really like the other person to do. And then you can kind of pick on that list. For me, I just think about the love languages. It kind of goes back to those love languages. If you haven't read the book, read the book, love languages, and discover, number one, what yours is and discover what his is. Because a lot of times when we're trying to connect with our partners, we do things for them that make us feel good and make us feel loved. And if that's not something that corresponds with their love language, with the way that they need to feel loved, then what happens is it kind of just goes on dry ground and they don't feel anything. And you're feeling like, I'm doing all these things for you and I'm trying to show you that I love you, and you're sitting there acting like you don't feel it at all. And the reality is maybe they don't, because you're, putting gas in his car and that means nothing for him. Whereas if you just gave him a hug before he left for work, that would mean everything for him. So it's important to be aware of the things that your partner needs to feel loved.
Yeah, I always recommend that book for couples. It's such a great starting point to just understanding how do we feel loved, how do we feel cared about, and why there's such a breakdown when you're speaking different love languages and don't know each other's love language.
Absolutely. That's a huge one for helping to foster that intimacy. And it helps you foster in kind of a more direct way instead of just, throwing a bunch of stuff up against the wall and trying to figure out where it works. That could take a long time. I think another one is reminiscing. Sometimes we don't take time to stop and really reminisce about the history. So if you've had any history in your relationship, whether it's a year or whether it's 20 years, if you can go back and look at pictures, if you can talk about together when you met or remember when, sometimes just that reminiscing together can really help connect you to why you fell in love to begin with.
I love that. Absolutely. I think that's such a great technique. And another thing is appreciation, keeping a journal by your bed or even just the notes on your phone, and write down one thing per day that you appreciate about your partner, just to, again, start changing the way that you view him or her so that you're feeling more love and intimacy towards them.
That is such a good one. And I prescribe that to everybody, especially when we have those feelings of there's nothing good. And when we're upset and our relationship is not going good, it's hard for us to really see both sides. We tend to be black or white thinkers or all or nothing thinkers in our relationships like that. But yes, you have to pay attention to the words that you're telling yourself because they are so very powerful. And your self-talk about your partner drives your feelings and your behavior towards your partner. And if your self-talk is predominantly negative, and all you're focusing on is all the bad and negative that he does, it's going to really affect it. So you can change that by doing exactly what you said. Writing down one good thing, a couple good things every single day can help shift that self-talk, which can help change your perspective in the marriage.
Yeah. And then if you really want to take it to the next level, share it with your partner on a daily basis.
Beautiful. Because who doesn't need that kind of positive reinforcement? We all thrive on it and we all love it.
Absolutely.
So I just realized that I forgot to ask you your Superwoman win and your Superwoman fail. So can you go ahead before we close out today and share with my audience your Superwoman win and your Superwoman fail?
Yes. So they're actually connected.
Mm-hmm.
My Superwoman win is that I ran my first ever retreat in Costa Rica a few weeks ago.
Awesome.
And it was such an amazing experience to connect with people, help them through relationship challenges, and just really help them connect on a deeper level in such an amazing setting. We were in Nosara, Costa Rica, which is this cool little surfer town in the jungle on the ocean, and it was just magical. So it being my first retreat, I wasn't 100% sure if it would feel rejuvenating for me as well, and it 100% did. So that was my win, was just trying something new and absolutely loving it, and I can't wait to run the next one.
That's a great win. Very cool. So it was a couples retreat?
Yeah, we opened it up to couples and individuals. So we had, I think, 4 couples and then 4 individuals. So about 12 people total.
That is awesome. That's great.
It was actually on the topic of intimacy and just connecting deeper with yourself and others. So it was just really magical.
Great win.
Yeah. Now, my fail, Nosara is 3 hours from the airport in Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a pretty expensive cab ride to get to the airport. And we get to the airport and I realized, oh my God, I left my passport in Nosara.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I know. So there was no way I was going to get it in time. If I went back, it would be 6 hours round trip. If somebody brought it to me, it'd be 3 hours and my flight would have already left. They weren't going to let me on the flight. I mean, of course I had a picture of it. I had the passport app, like a mobile passport app. I begged, I pleaded, nothing. So I ended up having to stay overnight in Liberia, and get a hotel, book a whole new flight, get a cab to bring my passport to me from 3 hours away.
Wow.
Yeah, it ended up being like $1,000 mistake. So
oh my God.
It was really, it was frustrating. But then, I just kind of, as I was getting worked up, I'm asking myself, is this going to matter 5 years from now? No, it didn't even matter 5 days later, but just one of those things where you just kind of like, how could you do that?
Yes. Oh gosh, that's definitely a big fail, especially, with the $1,000 ticket attached to the fail.
Yeah. The extra day in Costa Rica, not the end of the world.
Right.
But the price tag attached with the mistake was not pretty.
Yeah. And you know what? You got to give yourself grace. So I loved your reframe. That was great. And that's what we women have to do. We have those wins, we have those fails, and you just got to roll with the punches and change the voice inside your head. So beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about getting through those hard times in a relationship. We are going to finish up with one question from a listener about the topic. So this is Real Talk with Dr. Zoe. And so here's the question from the listener. I don't know when I should seek professional help. How do I know if my marriage is just going through a regular hard time or if it's going through a time when I need to actually seek help? How do I know the difference?
So my opinion is you should always seek help. If my car has a weird noise, I don't wait until I'm 100% positive that it's broken down and it's not working and I'm on the side of the highway. I bring it in immediately because I can't diagnose that. I can't fix it. So I bring it to somebody who can. And maybe they tell me, no big deal. You just need a little tune-up, AKA you could do 1 or 2 sessions, work things out, learn some new tools, and then move on. But it's a lot harder if you wait and wait and wait and your car breaks down on the side of the highway. And now you've got all these, potential consequences when had you brought it in the first place, it would have just been no big deal.
I think that's a good point. I'm the kind of person that's like, oh, maybe it'll go away. But when it comes to my car, when it comes to all kinds of things, but you're absolutely right about that. And, I saw this study somewhere, and so I can't cite it right now. Maybe I'll put it in the notes that said that couples wait an average of 6 years to seek help on an issue in their marriage. So they sit on a marital issue for 6 years before they seek help. And that to me is devastating. So, whether you want to go out the second you guys have a disagreement or you want to wait a little bit longer, that average of 6 years is way too long to waste your life and your happiness on.
Yeah. And coming from a couples therapist, the couples who come in early have such better success rates than the couples who sit on those issues for years and years and then come in when they are at their wit's end. That is not the time to do good work together. The time to do good work together is way before you're at your wit's end.
Right, because issues compound issues. And so often when you get to that point, you don't even know what the issue is anymore. You're just fighting. And I've had the same experience. I had a couple that just came into, I've been seeing them separately for a while, and we just finally had a couples therapy session. And, their issues go back 13 years. 13 years of anger that hasn't been expressed, and the husband didn't even feel like he could talk about it. And here we are in session, and he brings something up from 13 years ago that he has been harboring and has really been the main issue, the main kind of thread that's gone through all of their issues over this, over this past time. So yeah, and it's hard to get to that because so many things happen and it gets buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think maybe some of the barriers to people coming in, they might think, well, do I really need to pay somebody? Like, can't we just figure this out on our own? And to that, I would just say the cost of waiting. And like you said, with those compounding issues, then it's so much more complicated and the progress is so much slower in therapy that you end up spending a lot more money than if you just came in when you had one thing you wanted to work through and you learned some new tools and you figured it out. And, if you don't do any of that and then you end up getting divorced, the price tag on that is way more than couples therapy.
Way more. way more.
Emotionally and financially.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that ripple effect too.
And just time. I think time maybe gives people a little anxiety, like, I don't have time for this. But when things are running smooth in your relationship, your life runs smoother. You have more energy to be better at the things that you do want to devote yourself to. And then the third thing I think that is a barrier for people is that stigma of like, there has to be something super wrong if we can't figure this out on our own. And to that, I just say there is no class in relationships. Unless you're going to grad school and specializing in couples therapy, you don't get that training. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to expect that you're going to know exactly what to do all the time and just handle things perfectly. It's not realistic. You would never go to a job and somebody would just say, okay, here's your desk, get started. Like no training, no instruction. It's not realistic.
Yes, it is not realistic. And so if there's an issue in your marriage and you guys have addressed it once, you've addressed it twice, and you still don't feel like it's resolved, go ahead, schedule an appointment. Dr. Sarah works virtually. I work virtually. You can connect with either one of us. She's at coupleslearn.com. I'm at drzoeshaw.com, and you can have a couple session in the comfort of your own home.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah, for being on the show. We'll have to do this another time.
I would love to. I always have so much fun chatting with you, and thank you so much for having me on again.
What a great conversation. And if you are struggling at all in your marriage or your relationship, reach out. You can contact me at drzoeshaw.com. So thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Zoe Show. New shows go up every Tuesday morning, so subscribe so you don't miss a show. If you're interested in coaching or therapy, or you just want to get a little more help, go to my website. I have some articles there regarding all the things that we busy women have to deal with in our life. And you can also connect with me at any of my social medias, also at the same handle, Dr. Zoe Shaw. And you can join my free newsletter by texting the word join to 38470. I look forward to connecting with you wonderful ladies via social media over the week. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.